Kesha Williams had just transferred to a new school. She came from a place where survival meant learning to fight, where 8 years of mixed martial arts had turned her fists into weapons. She was a black belt wrapped in teenage silence. But the bullies didn't see that. They saw a quiet black girl, alone, an easy target. So they came at her with demands and threats, escalating the harassment every day. Then one afternoon, they crossed a line. Laughter followed. Someone said she deserved it. The hallway watched, but Kesha didn't break. They thought she was weak. They thought she'd take it. They were wrong. What happens when a bully picks the wrong fight? Stay tuned to find out. Comment where in the world you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., but Kesha Williams was already awake, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling of her new bedroom. Detroit felt like a lifetime away, though it had only been 3 days since the moving truck pulled away from their old house. She rolled out of bed and padded to the basement, where her mother had already set up the heavy bag in the corner. 40 minutes later, sweat dripped from her forehead as she finished her morning routine. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. The combinations flowed like breathing. 8 years of training had made the movements instinctive. But today, they felt different. Today, they felt necessary. Kesha, breakfast, her mother called from upstairs. Dr. Patricia Williams stood at the stove, still in her scrubs from the night shift at Millbrook General. How are you feeling about today, baby? Fine. Kesha grabbed a piece of toast. Just another school. Her mother's eyes held concern. I know this transition isn't easy. Millbrook is different from what we're used to. Different was an understatement. As Kesha walked through the front doors of Millbrook High, the sea of white faces confirmed what she already knew. Out of 800 students, she could count the black faces on 2 hands. The hallways buzzed with typical morning energy, but conversations seemed to pause as she passed. Whispers followed in her wake. She kept her head up, shoulders relaxed, the way Master Chen had taught her. Never show weakness, but never look for trouble. First period biology went smoothly enough. Second period history was tolerable. But lunch was where the real education began. The cafeteria stretched out like a social map. Popular kids claimed the center tables. Athletes dominated one corner. Theater kids clustered near the windows. Kesha grabbed a sandwich and looked for an empty spot. Well, look what wandered in here. The voice carried across 3 tables. Derek Morrison stood 6 feet 2 inches, with the kind of confident swagger that came from never being challenged. His Letterman jacket hung perfectly on broad shoulders, and his smile never reached his cold blue eyes. Behind him, Jake Wilson cracked his knuckles while Tommy Bradley snickered. The cafeteria fell quiet. All eyes turned toward the confrontation brewing in the center of the room. Kesha continued toward an empty table, but Derek stepped into her path. I'm talking to you. His voice carried the casual authority of someone used to being obeyed. We need to have a conversation. She stopped, meeting his gaze without flinching. About what? About how things work around here. Derek's smile widened, showing too many teeth. See, new students usually pay a little welcome fee. Call it insurance. Make sure nothing bad happens to them. Jake and Tommy flanked her sides, close enough that she could smell their cologne. The cafeteria remained dead silent. 200 students watching like it was dinner theater. Insurance against what? Kesha's voice stayed level, curious rather than confrontational. Accidents, Derek shrugged. Lockers getting jammed. Books going missing. People bumping into you in the halls. Funny how clumsy some folks can be around here, especially the ones who don't belong, Tommy added with a nasty grin. Kesha set her lunch tray on the nearest table. When she turned back to Derek, her posture remained relaxed, but something had shifted in her eyes. I don't pay protection money. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Derek's smile faltered for just a moment before returning full force. That's where you're wrong, girl. Everyone pays. Question is, whether you pay easy or you pay hard. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried across the silent room. Unless you think you're too good for our little system here, think you're better than the rest of us? I don't pay at all. She picked up her tray and walked around him toward the empty table. For a moment, Derek stood frozen, clearly not expecting outright refusal. The cafeteria waited. This isn't over, he called after her, loud enough for everyone to hear. Nobody disrespects me in my school. Nobody. Kesha sat down and unwrapped her sandwich as if nothing had happened. But her peripheral vision tracked Derek's every movement as he stormed out with his crew in tow. At a table across the room, Marcus Thompson shook his head and muttered to his friend, "Girl has no idea what she just started." The conversations gradually resumed, but the energy had changed. Word would spread through the school before the lunch period ended. The new girl had just declared war on Derek Morrison. Kesha took a bite of her sandwich, chewing slowly. She'd hoped to get through at least one day without trouble. But some things were inevitable, and backing down from bullies had never been an option. The real question wasn't whether Derek would retaliate. It was when, and how far he'd be willing to go. The harassment started before second period ended. Kesha walked to her locker, keys in hand, but the lock wouldn't turn. She tried again, checking the combination she'd memorized that morning. Nothing. Having trouble? Jake Wilson appeared beside her, grinning. Locks can be tricky when they get damaged. She examined the mechanism. Someone had jammed gum into the keyhole. Real mature. Just the beginning, Jake said, walking away backwards so he could watch her reaction. Derek's got a long memory. Third period American history dragged by without incident. But as Kesha gathered her books, she noticed her notebook was missing, the one with 3 days' worth of notes. She searched her bag twice before giving up. In the hallway, she spotted Tommy Bradley showing off the notebook to a group of freshmen, making exaggerated gestures as he read her handwriting aloud in a mocking voice. Look at this fancy penmanship. Must think she's real special. Kesha approached calmly. That's mine. Prove it. Tommy held it above his head like a playground bully. Maybe if you ask nice, I'll consider giving it back. She didn't ask. She didn't grab for it either. Instead, she pulled out her phone and snapped a photo of him holding it. What are you doing? Tommy's bravado wavered. Evidence. She slipped the phone back into her pocket. In case I need to file a theft report. Tommy's face reddened, but he threw the notebook at her feet before stalking away. The pages scattered across the hallway floor. As Kesha knelt to collect her notes, a pair of worn sneakers appeared in her line of sight. She looked up to see Marcus Thompson, the same student who'd commented at lunch. You need some advice, Marcus said quietly, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. I'm listening. Derek Morrison isn't just some rich kid playing tough. His dad owns half the businesses in town, including the car dealership where my mom works. His uncle's the police chief. When Derek wants something to happen, it happens. Kesha stood, clutching her retrieved notes. Are you trying to scare me? I'm trying to save you. Marcus's voice carried genuine concern. Last year, there was this kid, Miguel Santos, transfer student like you. Derek decided Miguel was getting too friendly with some girl Derek liked. Miguel ended up with a broken nose and 3 cracked ribs. Fell down some stairs, according to the official report. And you believe that? I believe Miguel transferred schools 2 weeks later. Marcus leaned closer. Look, I get it. Standing up feels good, but Derek doesn't fight fair, and he doesn't fight alone. Whatever you're thinking about doing, don't. Before Kesha could respond, Marcus melted back into the crowd of students changing classes. The afternoon brought escalating harassment. Someone accidentally spilled chocolate milk on her backpack during lunch. In chemistry lab, her safety goggles went missing, forcing her to borrow a scratched pair that made it impossible to read measurements clearly. By 6th period, a pattern had emerged. Derek's crew took turns making her life difficult, always with plausible deniability, always with witnesses who saw accidents, not harassment. But 7th period pushed things too far. Kesha sat in English class, trying to focus on the discussion of To Kill a Mockingbird, when Derek raised his hand. "Mrs. Patterson, I think we should hear from our newest student about this book. I bet she has some real insights into the themes." Mrs. Patterson smiled encouragingly. "Kesha, would you like to share your thoughts on Harper Lee's portrayal of racial injustice?" The setup was obvious, but Kesha responded thoughtfully, discussing the book's exploration of prejudice and moral courage. She spoke for 2 minutes, articulating her points clearly and intelligently. When she finished, Derek started slow clapping. "Wow, that was so well spoken. You're really articulate for," he paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "I mean, it's nice to hear someone who can express themselves so clearly." The classroom fell silent. Mrs. Patterson's face flushed, but she seemed frozen, unsure how to address the obvious racial undertone without making things worse. "Thank you," Kesha said evenly. "I appreciate you noticing my ability to communicate effectively." Derek's smile faltered slightly at her calm response, but he pressed forward. "It's just refreshing, you know. Sometimes people from certain backgrounds struggle with academic discussions." The silence grew heavier. A few students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "I'm sure you'll find that people from all backgrounds can surprise you," Kesha replied, her voice steady as steel. When the bell rang, she gathered her books without hurry, walking out with her head high. But inside, something had crystallized. The games were over. Derek had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. In the hallway, she could hear Derek laughing with his friends, probably congratulating himself on his clever performance. He had no idea what he'd just unleashed. Friday morning started with Kesha finding her locker decorated. Someone had taped a banana to the metal door with a note that read, "Welcome to the jungle," in Derek's distinctive handwriting. She removed it without expression, aware of the students gathering to watch her reaction. Some looked ashamed, others snickered. Kesha crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash, but she kept the tape as evidence. "Oh, did you not like your present?" Derek appeared with his usual entourage, speaking loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. "I thought you might be homesick for the urban wildlife." "Creative," Kesha said, closing her locker with deliberate calm. "But you might want to work on your penmanship. Makes it easy to identify the source." Derek's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to his targets talking back, especially not in front of an audience. "Maybe you need a lesson in respect. Maybe you need a lesson in basic human decency." The hallway buzzed with whispered reactions. Students pulled out phones, sensing something bigger brewing. Throughout the morning, the harassment intensified. In PE, someone had put itching powder in her gym clothes. During lunch, Jake Wilson deliberately bumped into her, sending her tray crashing to the floor. "Oops," Jake said, not bothering to hide his grin. "Hope you're not too clumsy to clean that up." Kesha knelt to gather the scattered food while students stepped around her. A few offered to help, but she waved them off. She could handle Derek's games. What she couldn't handle was the growing audience that seemed to enjoy the show. The breaking point came during 8th period study hall. Kesha sat alone at a corner table, working on calculus homework, when Derek and his crew approached. The study hall monitor had stepped out, leaving 30 students unsupervised. "Hey, everyone," Derek announced, his voice carrying across the room. "I've got something special to share." He pulled out his phone, and suddenly Kesha's voice filled the room through a small Bluetooth speaker. It was her English class discussion from the day before, but edited and manipulated. Her thoughtful comments about racial injustice had been spliced with audio clips to make it sound like she was saying inflammatory things about white people. The edited recording painted her as an angry, racist outsider who hated her new school and everyone in it. Students looked shocked, confused, some angry. "Guess we know how she really feels about us," Derek said, pocketing his phone with satisfaction. "Good thing we got to hear her true thoughts." Kesha sat frozen as whispers erupted around her. Some students looked suspicious, others disgusted. A few seemed to realize the audio was fake, but their voices were drowned out by those who believed it. That's not what I said. Kesha's voice cut through the noise, but Derek talked over her. Are you calling me a liar? Everyone just heard you. Everyone just heard you manipulate recordings to make me sound like something I'm not. Derek stepped closer to her table. Why would I need to manipulate anything? We all heard what kind of person you really are. The study hall door opened, and Mrs. Chen, the monitor, returned. The room fell silent, students suddenly fascinated by their homework. Is everything all right in here? Mrs. Chen asked, sensing the tension. Perfect, Derek said with his politician's smile. Just having a friendly discussion about current events. When the bell rang, Kesha gathered her books with hands that barely trembled. Students filed out, some avoiding eye contact, others staring openly. The damage was done. By tomorrow, Derek's edited recording would be all over social media. As she walked toward her final class, she overheard fragments of conversation. I can't believe she said that stuff. Seems so quiet and nice. Derek was right about her. At her locker after school, Kesha found Marcus waiting for her. That recording was fake, he said quietly. I was in English class. I heard what you actually said. Doesn't matter now. Kesha pulled out her jacket. Damage is done. You could fight it. Prove it was edited. Or I could fight the source. Marcus grabbed her arm. Don't do anything stupid. Derek's expecting you to retaliate. He's probably got it all planned out. How to make you look like the aggressor. How to get you suspended or arrested. Kesha looked at Marcus's concerned face, then at the students walking past, some still whispering and pointing. Derek had been systematic in his campaign to isolate and humiliate her. Every move calculated to push her toward a reaction that would justify his cruelty. Maybe it's time to give him what he's expecting. She shrugged off Marcus's grip and headed for the exit. Behind her, Marcus called out, Kesha, don't do this. It's not worth it. But some things were worth it. Her dignity was worth it. Her right to exist in this school without being terrorized was worth it. And sometimes the only way to stop a bully was to show them that their target could bite back. Outside, Derek and his crew were horsing around in the parking lot, probably celebrating their successful character assassination. They looked so pleased with themselves, so confident in their power. Kesha dropped her backpack by the school entrance and walked toward them with purpose. It was time to have that conversation Derek kept talking about, but this time it would be on her terms. Derek was still laughing about the recording when he saw Kesha approaching across the parking lot. His laughter died as he noticed her purposeful stride, the way she dropped her backpack like dead weight. Well, look who decided to come talk after all. Derek straightened, Jake and Tommy flanking him automatically. Ready to apologize for being so unfriendly? Kesha stopped 10 feet away, her voice calm and clear. I'm done with your games, Derek. The fake recording, the harassment, all of it. This ends now. Oh, it ends when I say it ends. Derek's confidence swelled with his audience. A few students had stopped to watch, sensing drama. You think you can just walk into my school and disrespect me? Think again. Your school? Kesha took a step closer. Last I checked, this was a public institution funded by taxpayers, including my mother. Derek's face reddened. Don't get smart with me. You're outnumbered and outclassed. Walk away while you still can. I tried walking away. You followed. I tried ignoring you. You escalated. I tried being reasonable. Another step closer. Now we do this my way. Tommy cracked his knuckles. You sure you want to do this? 3 against 1 doesn't look good for you. Neither does picking on someone you thought couldn't fight back. Kesha's voice remained steady, but her stance shifted slightly. Weight balanced on the balls of her feet. Last chance, Derek. Agree to leave me alone. And this doesn't have to get ugly. Derek laughed, the sound harsh in the afternoon air. You're hilarious. What are you going to do? Call your mommy? I'm going to give you exactly what you've been asking for. The moment Derek reached for her arm, Kesha moved. Her training kicked in with fluid precision. She twisted away from his grab, seized his wrist, and used his own momentum to send him stumbling. Before he could recover, her elbow connected with his solar plexus, doubling him over. Jake lunged next, swinging wild and angry. Kesha ducked, swept his legs, and sent him sprawling onto the asphalt. Tommy hesitated, suddenly realizing this wasn't going according to plan. Derek straightened, breathing hard, but furious. You think you're tough? Let's see how tough. What followed was brutal and efficient. Derek had size and rage, but Kesha had skill and 8 years of disciplined training. She moved like water around his clumsy attempts to grab or hit her, striking precisely when openings appeared. Jake and Tommy kept trying to help, but only succeeded in getting in Derek's way or finding themselves on the receiving end of Kesha's defensive strikes. The fight moved across the parking lot as Derek kept charging, kept swinging, kept refusing to stay down. By the time it ended, Derek was face down on the asphalt with Kesha's knee between his shoulder blades. They'd traveled nearly half a block. Derek's nose bled freely. Jake nursed a swollen eye, and Tommy held his ribs gingerly. Are we done? Kesha asked, her breathing controlled despite the exertion. Get off me, Derek gasped. Are we done? She repeated, applying slight pressure. Fine, we're done. You're going to leave me alone. All three of you. No more games, no more harassment, no more edited recordings. Are we clear? Yeah, we're clear. Kesha released him and stepped back, watching as Derek rolled over and sat up, blood trickling from his nose. The small crowd of witnesses stood in stunned silence. Good talk, she said, then walked back toward the school to retrieve her backpack. Meanwhile, inside the building, Principal Martinez was finishing up paperwork when her secretary knocked. Mrs. Martinez, there's been some kind of incident in the parking lot. Students are saying there was a fight. Principal Martinez sighed and reached for her jacket. How bad? Well, nobody's called an ambulance, but you might want to see this yourself. As the principal hurried outside, she found Derek Morrison wiping blood from his face while Jake and Tommy helped him to his feet. A cluster of students stood nearby, phones out, excited chatter filling the air. What happened here? Principal Martinez demanded. Nothing, Derek muttered, avoiding eye contact. Just fooling around. Derek Morrison, you're bleeding. That's not fooling around. I fell, Derek said quickly. Wasn't paying attention. Tripped over my own feet. Principal Martinez looked skeptical. But before she could press further, Derek and his friends were walking away, Derek leaning heavily on Jake for support. The next morning, the rumors had already evolved into legend. Some said Kesha had used weapons. Others claimed she'd beaten up 5 guys. The truth was impressive enough, but high school gossip had never been constrained by facts. During second period, Jessica Martinez, a sophomore with nervous energy, approached Kesha at her locker with her friend Amber close behind. Hey, Jessica said quietly, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. Can we talk to you about something? Kesha studied the two girls. Jessica looked scared but determined. Amber seemed ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. What's going on? We heard what happened yesterday with Derek and his friends, Jessica continued. And we were wondering, would you be willing to help with something similar? Similar? How? Amber finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. There are these guys from Riverside High. They've been bothering us at the bus stop after school yesterday. She trailed off, looking at Jessica. They grabbed Amber's backpack and dumped everything out, Jessica finished. Called her some really horrible names. Said they'd be back today to continue the conversation. Kesha closed her locker and turned to face them fully. What exactly are you asking me to do? Would you come with us to the bus stop today? Jessica's voice wavered between hope and fear. Maybe if they see you there, they'll leave us alone. Kesha looked at their frightened faces and thought about Derek's bloody nose, about the edited recording, about every small humiliation that had led to yesterday's confrontation. "What time does your bus come?" At 3:15, Kesha walked to the bus stop on Maple Street with Jessica and Amber. The afternoon sun cast long shadows between the houses, and a cool breeze rustled the leaves overhead. The two girls stayed close to her, their nervous energy almost palpable. "They usually show up around 3:20, Jessica whispered, checking her phone. "The bus doesn't come until 3:45, so they have plenty of time to what, exactly?" Kesha asked. Amber's voice shook slightly. "Yesterday they surrounded us, said we looked lonely and needed some company. When I tried to walk away, one of them grabbed my arm and said I was being rude. Then they dumped my backpack and made us pick everything up while they watched." Jessica added, "Said if we told anyone, they'd make sure we regretted it." Kesha nodded, her eyes scanning the street. "How many?" "3. Brad's the leader. Tall guy with bleached hair. Connor's got the sleeve tattoos, and Tyler's the one who grabbed Amber." At exactly 3:22, a beat-up Camaro turned onto Maple Street, music thumping from its speakers. The car slowed as it approached the bus stop, and 3 guys climbed out with the swagger of people who owned the neighborhood. Brad spotted Kesha immediately, his eyes narrowing with confusion. "Who's the new girl?" "Nobody," Jessica said quickly. "Just waiting for the bus." Connor laughed, flexing the tattoos that covered his forearms. "Looks like somebody to me. Looks like somebody who doesn't belong in this neighborhood." Tyler stepped closer to Amber, who instinctively moved behind Kesha. "Did you bring backup, sweetheart? That's not very friendly." "Actually," Kesha said, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet street. "I'm here to have a conversation with you 3. Brad's eyebrows rose. "A conversation about what?" "About how you're going to leave these girls alone from now on." The 3 boys exchanged glances before bursting into laughter. Connor wiped his eyes dramatically. "Oh, that's rich. The cavalry consists of one girl who thinks she's tough." "I don't think anything," Kesha replied calmly. "I'm simply informing you that your harassment ends today." Tyler stepped even closer to Amber, deliberately invading her space. "And what if we don't feel like ending anything? Then you'll discover that some people don't make easy targets." Brad moved to flank Kesha's left side while Connor took the right. "You know what? I like you. You've got spirit. Why don't you dump these losers and hang out with some real men?" "I'm not interested in hanging out with boys who terrorize children." "Children?" Tyler's voice turned ugly. "These aren't children. They're old enough to learn some respect." He reached out to grab Amber's shoulder, and that's when Kesha moved. Her left hand intercepted Tyler's reaching arm, twisting it away from Amber while her right hand struck his wrist. Tyler yelped and stumbled backward, cradling his arm. "What the?" Connor started forward, but Kesha was already repositioning. "Last warning," she said, her stance balanced and ready. "Walk away." Instead, Brad charged from her left while Connor came from the right. Kesha dropped low, sweeping Brad's legs while pivoting to catch Connor with an elbow to his midsection. Both boys hit the ground hard. Tyler, still nursing his wrist, pulled out his phone. "You crazy witch. I'm calling the cops." "Go ahead," Kesha said without taking her eyes off Brad and Connor, who were struggling to their feet. "Tell them 3 high school boys got beaten up while trying to assault 2 younger girls. I'm sure that'll go well for you." From behind her phone, Jessica had been recording the entire encounter. "I got all of it," she said, her voice stronger now, including the part where Tyler tried to grab Amber. Brad wiped blood from his split lip, glaring at Kesha with newfound respect and anger. "You have no idea who you're messing with. 3 cowards who pick on girls smaller than them." "Yeah, I've got a pretty good idea." Connor limped back toward the car, his tough guy swagger completely deflated. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Kesha said firmly. "If I see any of you near these girls again, our next conversation won't be this polite." Tyler started to say something, but Brad grabbed his arm. Come on, let's get out of here. As the Camaro pulled away with squealing tires, Jessica lowered her phone with shaking hands. Oh my God, that was incredible. Are you both okay? Kesha asked, her attention returning to the girls. Amber nodded, tears of relief in her eyes. Thank you. I can't believe you did that. They were counting on you being too scared to fight back, Kesha said. Bullies always count on that. The bus rounded the corner, its brakes hissing as it approached the stop. As they climbed aboard, Jessica was already uploading the video to her social media accounts. Everyone needs to see this, she said excitedly. Everyone needs to know that someone's finally standing up to these creeps. Kesha settled into a seat, unaware that Jessica's video would be shared hundreds of times before dinner, launching her from local legend to viral sensation overnight. By 7 p.m., Jessica's video had been shared over 300 times. By 9 p.m., it had reached 1,000. The caption read, "Girl stands up to bullies harassing students at bus stop." Finally, someone fights back. Comments poured in from students across 3 school districts. Stories of harassment, intimidation, and abuse that had been whispered about in hallways suddenly found a public forum. This is the girl who beat up Derek Morrison, too. About time someone stood up to the Riverside crew. She should teach self-defense classes. Meanwhile, across town, Derek Morrison sat in his bedroom with an ice pack pressed to his still-swollen nose, watching the video for the 5th time. His phone buzzed with notifications. Friends sending him the link, asking if this was the same girl who'd humiliated him. This can't be happening, he muttered, scrolling through the comments. Someone had already connected the dots, posting about his own encounter with Kesha in the school parking lot. His phone rang. Jake's name flashed on the screen. You seeing this? Jake's voice was tight with anger. Everyone's seeing this. My dad's already asking questions about why I look like I got hit by a truck. She's making us look like complete idiots. First us, now the Riverside guys. People are calling her some kind of superhero. Derek's jaw clenched. She's not a superhero. She just got lucky twice. At the same time in Riverside, Brad Matthews was having a similar conversation with his crew. How did we look so weak? Connor demanded, pacing his garage while Tyler nursed his still sore wrist. 3 of us against 1 girl, and we got destroyed because she knew how to fight, and we didn't expect it, Brad said, but his voice lacked conviction. Tyler pulled up the video again. Look at this. She doesn't even look winded afterward. And now everyone's calling us cowards and bullies. We are bullies, Connor snapped. That's the point. Fear keeps people in line. But if word gets out that some high school girl can take us down, our reputation's shot, Brad finished. Nobody's going to respect us after this. Back at Millbrook High, the viral video was creating a different kind of chaos. Students who had suffered in silence were suddenly finding their voices. Principal Martinez arrived at school Monday morning to find her voicemail full of messages from parents. Some demanded Kesha be expelled for violence. Others praised her for protecting their children. Most wanted to know why the school wasn't already addressing the harassment their kids had been reporting. Her secretary, Mrs. Chen, handed her a stack of incident reports that had been submitted over the weekend. 12 students came forward with harassment complaints. All of them mentioned seeing the video and deciding they couldn't stay quiet anymore. Principal Martinez flipped through the reports, her expression growing more troubled with each page. How did we not know about this? Some of these incidents happened off campus. Others, well, the students say they reported them, but nothing was done. During first period, Kesha found herself surrounded by students who wanted to thank her, ask her questions, or simply be near someone who had stood up to the system that had failed them. You're like a real-life action hero, said a sophomore named Danny, whose own report detailed months of harassment by older students. I'm not a hero, Kesha replied. I just got tired of being pushed around. But even as students celebrated her actions, the administration was scrambling to control the narrative. Principal Martinez called an emergency meeting with the school board, where the conversation quickly turned to damage control. The incident happened off school property, board president Walsh insisted. We can distance ourselves from this entirely. Can we? Principal Martinez pulled up the video on her laptop. Because half the comments are about how our school has a bullying problem that we've been ignoring. Board member Johnson leaned forward. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe we should listen to what these students are saying instead of worrying about our image. The meeting grew heated as board members debated whether to support Kesha or suspend her for fighting. Meanwhile, a parent petition was circulating online, demanding the school implement self-defense training and better protection for students. By lunch, over 50 students had signed up for a support group Jessica had organized. The group's mission was simple: create a safe space for students who had experienced harassment and advocate for better protection policies. As Kesha walked through the hallways, she noticed the change in atmosphere. Students who had once averted their eyes now nodded respectfully. Teachers who had previously ignored subtle harassment were suddenly more vigilant. But she also noticed Derek and his friends watching her with undisguised hatred. And she knew that while she'd won 2 battles, the war was far from over. The viral video had given her a platform and a following. But it had also painted a target on her back that was bigger than ever before. Tuesday morning, Kesha was called to the principal's office before first period. Principal Martinez sat behind her desk with the tight expression of someone who'd been awake too long dealing with phone calls. Please sit down. Principal Martinez gestured to the chair across from her. We need to discuss what happened at the bus stop. Students were being harassed. I helped them by engaging in physical violence off school property. Principal Martinez opened a file on her desk. I've received 17 calls from parents since yesterday. Some want you expelled, others want you given a medal. The school board is meeting tonight to decide how to handle this situation. Kesha kept her voice level. Handle what situation? I defended 2 students from assault. You beat up 3 boys and posted it online. I didn't post anything, and those boys were terrorizing students from this school. Principal Martinez rubbed her temples. Kesha, I understand your frustration, but vigilante justice isn't the answer. We have procedures. Protocols? Your procedures didn't stop Derek Morrison from harassing me for a week. Your protocols didn't protect Jessica and Amber from being grabbed and threatened. That's not. Principal Martinez started, then stopped. Look, I'm trying to help you here. The school board wants this to go away quietly. If you agree to stop the physical interventions, we can probably avoid suspension. And if I don't agree? Then we'll have to consider more serious consequences. Kesha stood up. Is that all? Please think about what I've said. This path you're on, it's not sustainable. As Kesha left the office, she found Danny and 3 other students waiting in the hallway. We heard you got called in, Danny said nervously. Are you in trouble? Maybe. Kesha started walking toward her locker. Why? Because we wanted to ask you something. Danny hurried to keep pace with her. A bunch of us were talking, and we were wondering, would you teach us what you know? Kesha stopped walking. Teach you what? How to fight back. How to defend ourselves. Danny's voice grew stronger. I've been getting pushed around since 7th grade. Yesterday, for the first time, nobody bothered me. They're all scared you might be watching. That won't last forever. Exactly. That's why we need to learn how to protect ourselves. A girl named Sarah stepped forward. My older brother goes to Riverside. He says those boys you fought are planning something. They're embarrassed and angry. What kind of something? He wouldn't say. But he warned me to be careful walking home. Meanwhile, in the gym office, Coach Rodriguez was having his own difficult conversation with Principal Martinez. You want me to ban her from using the gym? Coach Rodriguez crossed his arms. For what? For starting an unauthorized martial arts program. Parents are calling this a fight club. Have you seen what she's actually doing?
She's teaching kids to defend themselves, basic moves, confidence building.
It's exactly what half these students need.
Principal Martinez sighed. The insurance liability alone is less than what we'll face when one of these harassment incidents turns into something worse.
Coach Rodriguez leaned forward. Sarah, I've been teaching here for 12 years. I've never seen students more engaged in physical fitness than they've been this week.
The school board doesn't see it that way.
Then maybe the school board needs to spend some time in the hallways, watching how these kids interact now, watching how the bullies are suddenly finding other things to do with their time. That afternoon, Kesha arrived at the gym to find 30 students waiting for her. Word had spread despite the administration's concerns. Students who had never spoken to each other were united by shared experiences of harassment and a desire to change their situations.
I talked to Principal Martinez, Kesha announced. The school board doesn't want us meeting here.
Disappointed murmurs rippled through the group.
However, Kesha continued, this is technically after school hours, and Coach Rodriguez has given us permission to use the space. Coach Rodriguez emerged from his office.
As far as I'm concerned, this is a fitness club focused on self-defense and confidence building, completely within school guidelines. The students erupted in cheers, but Kesha held up her hand for quiet. Before we start, everyone needs to understand something.
This isn't about fighting.
This is about having the skills and confidence to protect yourself and others. We don't look for trouble, but we don't run from it either. As she began teaching basic defensive stances, she noticed Derek and Jake watching through the gym's glass doors.
Their expressions mixed anger with something that might have been fear. Derek turned to Jake. Look at them. She's building an army. What do we do about it? Derek's smile was cold. We make sure everyone understands that actions have consequences.
Inside the gym, students practiced breaking free from wrist grabs and verbal de-escalation techniques, unaware that their newfound confidence was being viewed as a direct threat by those who had profited from their fear. By Friday, Kesha's self-defense program had grown to over 60 students. The corner of the gym buzzed with activity as teenagers practiced escaping holds, building confidence, and learning to project strength through body language.
Remember, Kesha called out to the group, the goal is always to de-escalate and get away safely. Fighting is the last resort, not the first option.
Sarah, who had been quiet and withdrawn just a week ago, now stood straighter as she practiced defensive moves.
I can't believe how different I feel, she told Danny during a water break. Like I actually have some control over what happens to me. Same, Danny replied, wiping sweat from his forehead.
Yesterday, when those seniors tried to mess with me in the hallway, I just looked them in the eye and kept walking.
They backed off. Coach Rodriguez watched from his office, taking notes for his report to Principal Martinez.
The transformation in these students was remarkable.
Not just physically, but in their entire demeanor.
They walked taller, spoke with more confidence, and seemed to support each other in ways he'd never seen before.
But while the program flourished inside the gym, outside, forces were mobilizing against it.
That same Friday evening, Derek Morrison sat in his car in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner on the edge of town, waiting. His nose had healed, but his pride remained shattered. The video of his humiliation had been viewed over 10,000 times, with comments that made his stomach churn.
At 8:30, a beat-up Camaro pulled into the parking spot next to him.
Brad Matthews climbed out, followed by Connor and Tyler, all three looking as angry and frustrated as Derek felt.
Took you long enough, Derek said as they slid into the booth across from him and Jake.
Had to make sure nobody followed us, Brad replied, his voice tight.
Can't afford any more videos going viral. Tommy shifted uncomfortably. I still think this is a bad idea. What if someone finds out we're working together? Nobody's going to find out, Derek snapped. Unless you plan on running your mouth. Connor leaned forward. Look, we all have the same problem.
This girl made us look weak, and now everyone thinks they can stand up to us. Our reputations are garbage.
It's worse than that, Jake added.
She's teaching other kids to fight back. Yesterday, some freshman actually pushed back when I tried to mess with him.
A freshman? Tyler nodded angrily. Same things happening at our school. Kids who used to hand over lunch money are suddenly growing spines. Derek pulled out his phone and showed them a video from that afternoon's training session. 60 kids. She's got 60 kids learning to fight. In a month, it'll be 100. So, what's your plan? Brad asked. Derek's smile was cold and calculating. We can't touch her physically anymore. Too many people watching, too many cameras.
But we can destroy her legally.
How?
Assault charges. My dad knows people in the legal system. We file complaints with the police, claim she attacked us unprovoked, get her arrested, expelled, maybe even sent to juvenile detention.
Connor frowned. But there's video evidence of what really happened. Videos can be misinterpreted, Derek said smoothly.
Especially when you have the right lawyer explaining them to a judge.
My dad's already talked to our family attorney. What about the bus stop thing? Tyler asked. That video is everywhere.
3 high school boys versus 1 girl. We'll claim she was armed, that we were defending ourselves.
Who's going to believe we were actually trying to hurt those sophomore girls? Jake nodded slowly.
And once she's arrested, her little fight club falls apart. Kids go back to being scared, and we go back to being in control.
Brad looked skeptical. This could backfire. What if people don't believe us?
They will, Derek said confidently. Because my family has influence in this town, and hers doesn't.
Because we're the victims here, not her.
The 6 boys spent the next hour planning their strategy. They would coordinate their stories, file complaints simultaneously, and present a united front claiming that Kesha Williams was a dangerous individual who had attacked innocent students without provocation. Meanwhile, back at the school, Kesha was finishing up the training session, unaware of the legal trap being set for her.
Same time Monday? Sarah asked as students gathered their belongings. Absolutely, Kesha replied.
And remember, practice your situational awareness over the weekend.
Trust your instincts.
As the students filed out, chattering excitedly about their progress, Coach Rodriguez approached Kesha. You've done something special here, he said quietly. These kids are different, stronger. They were always strong, Kesha replied.
They just needed to remember it. Be careful, though.
Change like this makes some people nervous, especially people who benefit from the old system. Kesha nodded, gathering her own things. She'd felt the tension building all week. The way Derek and his friends watched her, the whispered conversations that stopped when she approached, the sense that something was brewing beneath the surface. What she didn't know was that the storm was about to break, and it would test not just her fighting skills, but her faith in justice itself. Monday morning, Dr. Patricia Williams received the call that changed everything. She was reviewing patient charts at the hospital when her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Dr. Williams, this is Sergeant Hayes with the Millbrook Police Department.
We need you to come down to the station with your daughter. Patricia's blood went cold. Is Kesha hurt? What happened? She's not hurt, ma'am.
But assault charges have been filed against her.
We need to bring her in for questioning.
Assault charges?
That's impossible. My daughter doesn't, ma'am. We have 6 complainants. I suggest you contact a lawyer. Patricia's hands shook as she called Kesha's school, then her own supervisor to request emergency leave.
By the time she reached Millbrook High, police were already waiting in the principal's office. Principal Martinez looked stricken as she explained the situation. 6 boys from 2 different schools have filed formal complaints claiming Kesha attacked them without provocation.
That's ridiculous, Patricia said firmly. My daughter was defending herself and protecting other students. The complainants tell a different story, Sergeant Hayes said, checking his notes.
They claim she's been systematically targeting and assaulting male students.
They're requesting restraining orders.
When Kesha was called to the office, her calm composure wavered for the first time since transferring to Millbrook. Seeing her mother's worried face and the police officer's stern expression, she understood that Derek's retaliation had taken a form she hadn't anticipated.
Am I under arrest? she asked quietly. Not yet, Sergeant Hayes replied. But you need to come to the station for questioning. Your mother can accompany you. As word spread through the school that Kesha had been taken away by police, the student body erupted into organized chaos. Jessica Martinez burst into tears when she heard the news. This is my fault, she sobbed to Sarah. If I hadn't posted that video, no, Sarah said firmly, surprising herself with her own strength. This is Derek's fault and Brad's and all the other bullies who can't stand that someone finally stood up to them. Within an hour, students were organizing. Danny created a group chat called Justice for Kesha that grew to over 200 members in 30 minutes. Videos from the bus stop incident were reposted with detailed explanations of what had really happened. Marcus Thompson, who had tried to warn Kesha weeks ago, now found himself leading an impromptu protest in the school cafeteria. They're trying to destroy her for protecting us, he announced to anyone who would listen. For giving us the courage to protect ourselves. Meanwhile, at the police station, Kesha sat in an interrogation room with her mother and the court-appointed lawyer Patricia had hastily contacted. Tell me exactly what happened, the lawyer, Ms. Rodriguez, said, starting with your first day at school. Kesha recounted everything: Derek's protection money demand, the escalating harassment, the edited recording, the parking lot confrontation, and the bus stop incident. Her mother listened with growing anger as details emerged that Kesha had never shared. Why didn't you tell me about this? Patricia asked, hurt evident in her voice. Because I thought I could handle it myself, and because I knew if you complained to the school, it would just make things worse. Ms. Rodriguez took notes furiously. Do you have any evidence of this harassment? Some. I took photos of things they did to my locker. There might be security footage of some incidents. Back at school, Coach Rodriguez was having his own heated conversation with Principal Martinez. You know this is wrong, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. You've seen what that girl has done for our students, the confidence she's given them, the way she's helped them stand up for themselves. My hands are tied, Principal Martinez replied. 6 families have filed complaints. The school board is in crisis mode because they're more worried about lawsuits than about doing what's right. Coach Rodriguez, no. Let me finish. I've watched Derek Morrison and his friends terrorize students for years. I've filed reports, recommended interventions, suggested consequences. And what happened? Nothing. But one girl stands up to them, and suddenly everyone's concerned about violence in schools. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Mrs. Chen entered, looking overwhelmed. Principal Martinez, there are about 50 students in the main hallway holding signs. They're demanding Kesha's charges be dropped. Signs? What kind of signs? Justice for Kesha Star. Asterisk stop protecting bullies. She defended us. And there are parents arriving too. Lots of parents. Principal Martinez closed her eyes. Call the school board president. Tell him we have a situation. As the protest grew outside, Dr. Williams sat beside her daughter in the police station, watching her child face consequences for having the courage to stand up to injustice. Whatever happens, Patricia whispered, I'm proud of you. Kesha squeezed her mother's hand, knowing that the fight for her freedom was just beginning, but also knowing that she was no longer fighting alone. 2 weeks later, the night before the trial, Kesha sat at her kitchen table reviewing her testimony with Ms. Rodriguez. The lawyer had become a fierce advocate, working pro bono after seeing the evidence of systematic harassment. Remember, Ms. Rodriguez said, tapping her pen against her legal pad. Stick to the facts. Don't let their lawyer provoke you into anger. That's exactly what they want. What if the judge doesn't believe me? Kesha asked, voicing the fear that had kept her awake for nights. Then we'll appeal. But I think you'll be surprised by how much support you have. Dr. Williams entered the kitchen, carrying a box of printed emails. These are just from today, she said, setting it down heavily. Letters of support from parents, students, even teachers from other schools who heard about the case. Ms. Rodriguez smiled. The prosecutor's office is getting similar correspondence. Public opinion is strongly in your favor.
Across town, Derek Morrison was having a very different conversation with his father's attorney, Mr. Blackwood, a sharp-dressed man with cold eyes and an expensive watch.
I want you to understand something, Blackwood said, his voice cutting through the tension in the Morrison family's living room. If any inconsistencies emerge in your testimony tomorrow, this entire case falls apart. Derek shifted uncomfortably. There won't be any inconsistencies. There better not be.
Because if it comes out that you've been lying, assault charges will be the least of your problems.
Filing false police reports is a felony.
Jake and Tommy exchanged nervous glances from their seats on the leather couch. The weight of what they'd done was beginning to sink in as the trial approached.
What about the videos? Tommy asked weakly. People are going to see what really happened. Videos can be taken out of context, Blackwood replied smoothly. That's why we're emphasizing the pattern of violent behavior.
6 separate incidents make it harder to claim self-defense. Meanwhile, Brad Matthews was facing his own crisis of confidence at the Riverside Boys emergency meeting.
I'm starting to think we made a mistake, Tyler said, pacing Connor's garage. What if they have evidence we don't know about? Like what? Brad snapped, but his voice lacked its usual authority. Security cameras, witnesses, I don't know. But this whole thing feels like it's spinning out of control. Connor nodded grimly.
My dad says if we lose this case, we could face perjury charges.
He's talking about hiring our own lawyer.
Your dad's right to be worried, Tyler said.
Because I heard something today. Apparently, there are going to be like 20 students testifying for her tomorrow.
Back at Millbrook High, those 20 students were gathering in the school library for a final preparation session organized by Marcus Thompson and Jessica Martinez. Remember, Marcus addressed the group, just tell the truth about what you saw and experienced.
Don't exaggerate. Don't add details you're not sure about. Sarah raised her hand. What if they try to make us look like liars?
Then we stay calm and stick to our stories, Jessica replied.
Because our stories are true. Danny nodded firmly. I've been bullied by Derek for 3 years. Tomorrow, I finally get to tell someone in authority what that was like.
Coach Rodriguez, who had been listening from the back of the room, stepped forward.
I want you all to know how proud I am of your courage. Standing up in court takes the same kind of bravery Kesha showed in that parking lot. Will you be testifying too, Coach? Sarah asked. I will, and so will Principal Martinez, though she doesn't know it yet.
The group looked surprised.
Marcus frowned. She's going to testify for Kesha?
She's going to testify about the harassment reports that were filed and ignored, the pattern of behavior that led to this situation. Ms. Rodriguez subpoenaed her this afternoon. As the meeting wrapped up, students hugged each other goodbye, knowing that tomorrow would determine not just Kesha's fate, but the future of their school's culture. That night, Kesha lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. 8 months ago, she'd been a quiet kid in Detroit, focused on her training and her studies. Now, she was the center of a legal battle that had divided her new community. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica.
Whatever happens tomorrow, you changed everything here. Thank you.
Similar messages had been coming in all evening from students she'd helped, parents whose children had found their voices, and even strangers who had seen the viral videos and been inspired by her courage. At 2 a.m., she finally drifted off to sleep, knowing that in 8 hours, she would walk into that courtroom carrying the hopes and fears of everyone who had ever been bullied, everyone who had ever been told to stay quiet, everyone who believed that standing up for what's right was worth the risk. The trial would determine her legal fate. But the real verdict had already been delivered by her community. She had given them the courage to believe in justice. The Millbrook County Courthouse buzzed with tension as supporters filled every available seat. Students, parents, and community members had arrived early, creating a line that stretched around the building. Judge Patricia Thompson, a stern woman in her 50s, called the court to order at 9 a.m. sharp. The state versus Kesha Williams. Charges of assault in the second degree, she announced. Mr. Blackwood, you may present your opening statement. Derek's attorney stood confidently,
his expensive suit commanding attention.
Your Honor, this case is about a pattern of unprovoked violence perpetrated by the defendant against 6 innocent young men. We will show that Kesha Williams systematically targeted and assaulted my clients, causing physical harm and emotional trauma. He gestured toward Derek, who sat with his head down, playing the victim. These boys were simply going about their daily lives when they became targets of the defendant's aggression. The evidence will show that she is a dangerous individual who uses her martial arts training to intimidate and harm others. Ms. Rodriguez rose for the defense, her voice clear and strong. Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of unprovoked assault, but a young woman defending herself and others from systematic harassment and bullying.
The evidence will show that every action my client took was in response to escalating threats and actual physical aggression from the complainants. The prosecution called Derek first. He took the stand with practiced nervousness, recounting a fabricated version of events where Kesha had approached him aggressively in the cafeteria. I was just trying to be friendly to the new student, Derek testified, his voice quavering with false emotion. I offered to show her around, help her fit in. Instead, she became hostile and threatened me. And what happened in the parking lot? Blackwood prompted. She cornered me and my friends after school. We tried to walk away, but she followed us. When I attempted to de-escalate the situation, she attacked without warning. Ms. Rodriguez stood for cross-examination. Mr. Morrison, isn't it true that you demanded protection money from my client on her first day? I don't know what you mean. Isn't it also true that you created an edited audio recording to humiliate her in front of other students? Derek's composure slipped slightly. I never edited anything. We'll see about that. Ms. Rodriguez turned to the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to present Defense Exhibit A.
The courtroom fell silent as the original unedited recording of Kesha's English class discussion played through the speakers, followed immediately by Derek's manipulated version. The difference was stark and undeniable. Derek's face flushed red as whispers erupted throughout the courtroom. That was just a joke. A joke that you used to humiliate my client in front of 30 students. Objection, Blackwood called, but the damage was done. The prosecution's case continued with Jake and Tommy providing similar fabricated accounts, but their stories began falling apart under cross-examination. Tommy contradicted Jake's timeline, and Jake couldn't explain why security footage showed them harassing other students on the same days they claimed to be victims. When Brad Matthews took the stand, representing the Riverside Boys, his testimony crumbled even faster. So, you're telling this court, Ms. Rodriguez said, that 3 high school boys were intimidated by one girl at a bus stop? She was aggressive, Brad mumbled. Aggressive? Or defending 2 younger students from harassment? Ms. Rodriguez played Jessica's unedited video, which clearly showed Brad and his friends threatening the girls before Kesha intervened. The defense began with Marcus Thompson, whose testimony about Derek's 3-year campaign of bullying was devastating. Student after student took the stand, each describing incidents of harassment that painted a clear picture of systematic intimidation. Jessica's emotional testimony about the bus stop incident brought several jurors to tears. Tyler grabbed my friend's arm when she tried to walk away. We were scared and outnumbered. Kesha saved us. Sarah's testimony was equally powerful. Derek and his friends made school a nightmare for anyone they decided to target. Kesha gave us hope that someone would finally stand up to them. Principal Martinez's reluctant testimony about ignored harassment reports and the school's failure to protect students added institutional weight to the defense's case. Finally, Kesha took the stand herself. Her calm, measured responses contrasted sharply with the complainant's nervous evasions. I never wanted to fight anyone, she testified. I just wanted to go to school safely. When that wasn't possible, I defended myself and others who couldn't defend themselves. During closing arguments, Ms. Rodriguez spoke directly to the judge's sense of justice. Your Honor, the evidence is clear. My client acted in self-defense against systematic harassment and assault. To punish her for protecting herself and others would send a message that bullies can operate with impunity while their victims face criminal charges for standing up. Judge Thompson deliberated for 30 minutes before returning to the bench.
The courtroom held its collective breath as she looked directly at Kesha.
After reviewing all evidence and testimony, this court finds the defendant not guilty on all charges. Furthermore, I recommend that the district attorney investigate potential perjury charges against the complainants. The courtroom erupted in cheers as Kesha hugged her mother and attorney, finally free from the legal threat that had hung over her for weeks. The gavel's final bang echoed through the courthouse as Judge Thompson's words settled over the packed courtroom. Derek Morrison sat frozen at the plaintiff's table, his face pale as the reality of perjury charges sank in. Behind him, his father's expression had shifted from confident authority to barely contained fury. "You told me this was a sure thing," Mr. Morrison hissed to Blackwood as reporters began approaching. "You said the girl didn't have a chance." Blackwood was already packing his briefcase, eager to distance himself from the disaster. "Your son lied to me about the evidence. There's nothing I could do once those recordings surfaced." Across the aisle, Jake Wilson and Tommy Bradley sat in stunned silence as their parents processed what had just happened. Mrs. Wilson's face was white with shock. "Perjury charges. That's a felony, isn't it?" "Mom, Jake started, but his mother cut him off. "We'll discuss this at home. And you'll be calling every family affected by this mess to apologize personally." Meanwhile, the Riverside boys were experiencing their own reckoning. Brad Matthews watched his carefully constructed tough guy image crumble as his father stood to leave without a word. Connor and Tyler followed behind, their bravado completely evaporated. "This is insane," Tyler whispered as they pushed through the crowd. "We could go to jail for this." "Should have thought of that before you decided to lie under oath," Connor's mother snapped, overhearing. "I raised you better than this." As the families of the complainants filed out in shame, the courthouse celebration was just beginning. Students who had testified surrounded Kesha with tears of joy and relief. "You did it!" Jessica cried, throwing her arms around Kesha. "You actually beat them." "We did it," Kesha corrected, looking around at all the faces that had supported her. "All of us together." Dr. Williams stood nearby, watching her daughter with a mixture of pride and amazement. The quiet girl who had moved from Detroit just months ago had become a symbol of courage for an entire community. "I'm so proud of you, baby," she whispered when Kesha reached her. "Not just for winning, but for how you handled all of this." Ms. Rodriguez gathered her papers with satisfaction. In 20 years of practice, she'd rarely seen a case where justice felt so clear-cut. "The district attorney will definitely pursue perjury charges," she told the Williams family. "False police reports, lying under oath, these boys have serious legal troubles ahead." Outside the courthouse, news vans lined the street as reporters interviewed students, parents, and community members about the landmark case. The story had grown beyond Millbrook, becoming a national conversation about bullying, self-defense, and institutional failure to protect students. "This sends a message," Marcus Thompson told a reporter, flanked by dozens of students. "You can't terrorize people and then play victim when they fight back." The weeks following the trial brought swift changes to Millbrook High. Principal Martinez, chastened by her court testimony about ignored harassment reports, implemented new policies for addressing bullying complaints. Zero tolerance became actual zero tolerance, not just words in a handbook. Derek Morrison never returned to school. The perjury charges, combined with the civil suits filed by several families whose children he had harassed, led to his enrollment in a private military academy 3 states away. His parents quietly sold their house and moved, unable to face the community where their son's crimes had been exposed. Jake Wilson and Tommy Bradley pleaded guilty to filing false police reports, receiving community service and probation. Both were required to attend counseling and complete anger management courses. Jake's college scholarship was revoked, and Tommy was suspended from the football team permanently. The Riverside boys faced similar consequences. Brad Matthews was expelled and charged with multiple counts of harassment from victims who came forward after the trial. Connor and Tyler were suspended pending their own legal proceedings, their reputations in ruins. But the most significant change came in the form of Kesha's self-defense program, which was not only officially sanctioned but expanded schoolwide. 3 months after the trial, Coach Rodriguez stood in the main gymnasium, watching over 100 students participate in what was now called the Student Empowerment and Safety Program. The waiting list had grown so long that they'd added evening sessions and weekend workshops. "I never imagined it would grow this big," he told Kesha as she led a group of freshmen through basic defensive techniques. "Neither did I," Kesha replied, adjusting his student's stance. "But I think people were ready for something like this. They just needed permission to believe they could be strong." The program had evolved beyond physical self-defense to include conflict resolution, bystander intervention training, and peer mediation. Students learned not just how to protect themselves, but how to recognize and interrupt bullying before it escalated. Sarah, who had been one of Kesha's first students, now served as a peer instructor for younger kids. "The best part isn't learning to fight," she told a group of nervous 7th graders. "It's learning that you don't have to be afraid anymore." The transformation was evident throughout the school. Hallway interactions had changed fundamentally. Students walked with more confidence, spoke up more readily, and most importantly, supported each other when problems arose. Danny, who had been Derek's frequent target, now led a peer support group for students dealing with anxiety and depression related to past bullying. "Kesha didn't just teach us to defend ourselves physically," he explained to new members. "She taught us that we deserve to feel safe and that we have the power to make that happen." The ripple effects extended beyond Millbrook High. Other schools in the district requested similar programs. Anti-bullying organizations nationwide reached out for consultation. College recruiters took notice of Kesha's leadership and community impact. On a quiet Friday afternoon in spring, 6 months after the trial, Kesha found herself in the same cafeteria where Derek had first demanded protection money. But the atmosphere was completely different now. Students from different grades and social groups sat together. Conversations were livelier, and the underlying tension that had once defined the space was gone. Jessica approached her table with a letter in her hand. "This came to the main office for you," she said, grinning. Kesha opened the envelope to find a handwritten note from a student at a school in California. "I saw your story on the news and started my own self-defense group here. We have 30 members now and 0 bullying incidents this semester. Thank you for showing us that we don't have to accept being treated badly." "Another one?" Marcus asked, settling into the seat across from her. "Another one," Kesha confirmed, adding the letter to a growing collection she kept in her locker. As she looked around the transformed cafeteria, then out the windows to where students were practicing confidence-building exercises in the courtyard, Kesha reflected on how much had changed since that first day when she'd refused to pay Derek's protection money. She'd come to Millbrook hoping to avoid trouble and get through school quietly. Instead, she'd discovered that sometimes the most important battles are the ones you don't choose, they choose you. And sometimes standing up for what's right changes not just your own life, but an entire community. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. As students gathered their belongings and headed to class, they moved with an energy and confidence that would have been unimaginable just months before. Kesha smiled as she packed up her own things. Her mother had been right about Millbrook being different from Detroit. It was different. It was better. And she had played a part in making it that way. Walking through hallways that once felt hostile, surrounded by students who had found their voices and their strength, Kesha Williams knew that some fights are worth everything you put into them. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.